Jack Harmon was in his garage, oil-stained hands working on his Harley, when the sound of splintering would shatter the silence. For men in tactical vests stormed into his home screaming, "You're in violation!" What they didn't know was that breaking down Jack's door wasn't just a mistake. It was a declaration of war. Welcome to my channel. Please subscribe if you want more Karen and HOA stories. Please listen to the whole story and give me a comment about your feelings. Jack Harmon had always been a man who lived by a code. Respect wasn't demanded. It was earned. After 25 years as a Marine Corps mechanic, including 3 tours in Iraq and 1 in Afghanistan, he'd earned every ounce of peace he found in Oakwood Estates. It was supposed to be simple. A quiet suburban neighborhood where he could restore bikes, watch sunsets from his porch with a cold beer, and live without drama. For 3 years, it was peaceful under Richard, the former HOA president who understood property rights and left homeowners alone. But then Marcus Donnelly took over. Marcus wasn't just any HOA president. He was a corporate security executive turned aspiring politician with an ego bigger than his title. Within weeks of taking office, he unleashed a tsunami of absurd rules. Mailbox height regulations, approved holiday light colors, even lawn symmetry requirements. His team of security consultants patrolled the streets in SUVs plastered with magnetic HOA logos, photographing anything remotely questionable. Children's toys left in driveways, slightly uneven grass, or worse, oil stains from car repairs. Most neighbors complied out of fear, but not Jack. It started small. Complaints about garbage cans visible from the street, oil marks on the driveway, and finally, his American flag hanging in the garage. To Jack, that flag wasn't decoration. It symbolized sacrifice. He'd fought beneath it overseas, seen friends die protecting it. When Marcus labeled it non-regulation and aesthetically displeasing, Jack refused to take it down. Fines piled up, $75,150, $300, but Jack ignored them, knowing they couldn't legally enter his property without permission. At the quarterly HOA meeting, tensions boiled over. Standing face-to-face with Marcus, Jack declared, "That flag stayed up while I was getting shot at overseas. It's not coming down because you think it clashes with your color scheme." Marcus smirked, replying smugly, "Rules are rules, Mr. Harmon. No one is above them, not even veterans." Afterward, elderly neighbor Mrs. Henderson whispered to Jack in the parking lot, "They're doing the same to me. My late husband served in Vietnam, and now they say the memorial garden I planted violates landscaping codes." This revelation struck a nerve. It wasn't personal vendettas, it was systemic oppression disguised as community governance. Jack began documenting everything. Letters, alleged violations, encounters. Having learned in the Marines that intelligence wins battles, he installed additional security cameras around his property. Yet the harassment only escalated. One day, Mike, a fellow Iron veteran and retired JAG attorney, stopped by to help change the oil in Jack's Harley. Within an hour, one of Marcus' goons appeared across the street, snapping photos. When confronted, the man claimed noise complaints had been filed before they'd even started the bike. That night, another violation notice materialized on Jack's door. $500 for unauthorized mechanical work and noise disturbance, dated 2 hours before Mike had arrived. Soon, Jack noticed cars parked near his house at odd hours, occupants watching his every move. Neighbors reported being questioned about him, his routines, visitors, habits. Something sinister was brewing, and Jack knew it was only a matter of time before things spiraled further out of control. But nothing could have prepared him for what happened next. On a quiet Sunday afternoon, while working on his vintage Harley, the pounding on his front door came like thunder. Before he could reach it, the sound of splintering oak echoed through the house. 2 men in tactical vests forced their way inside, shouting, "Emergency inspection!" This wasn't just about fines anymore. This was about power, and Marcus had no idea who he was messing with. Jack Harmon wasn't the type to back down, but he also wasn't reckless. After the forced entry into his home, he knew this fight had escalated far beyond fines and petty rules. The HOA's actions weren't just about enforcing regulations. They were about control, intimidation, and something darker that Jack was only beginning to uncover. With his brothers from the Iron Veterans by his side, he decided to dig deeper, knowing full well that Marcus Donnelly wouldn't stop until either Jack gave in or they exposed him completely. The first step was securing Jack's property. Dawson, their road captain and former SWAT officer, took charge of reinforcing the door. "We'll make sure no one gets in without breaking a sweat next time," he said as he installed a heavy-duty deadbolt and reinforced the frame with steel plates. While Dawson worked, Rodriguez, a former Marine MP, reviewed the security footage from Jack's cameras. He zoomed in on the faces of Marcus' security team, studying them like he used to study enemy movements during his tours. "These guys aren't amateurs," Rodriguez muttered. "They've done this before." Meanwhile, Mike, the club president and retired JAG attorney, sifted through the official HOA bylaws they'd obtained after threatening legal action. His eyes narrowed as he flipped through the pages. "This is unbelievable," he said, shaking his head. "Marcus has been fabricating violations left and right. Half of these so-called rules don't even exist in the original bylaws." He pointed to a section marked Emergency Inspections. According to this, they can only inspect exterior areas, and even then, they need written notice 48 hours in advance. "What happened to you?" "That was straight up breaking and entering." Jack clenched his fists at the memory of Trevor tossing his flag onto the workbench like it was trash. "It's not just about me anymore," he said quietly. "If they're willing to do this to a combat veteran who knows how to push back, imagine what they're doing to people who can't fight back, like Mrs. Henderson or Sarah Johnson." That night, Wilson, the oldest member of the group at 72, sat with Jack at the kitchen table. His hands, weathered from years of service in Vietnam, rested on the wooden surface. "You know, son," he began, his voice soft but firm, "in my day we had a saying, when the enemy gets a vote, you better cast yours twice. These guys think they're untouchable because they wear suits and carry clipboards. But they're forgetting one thing: they picked the wrong neighborhood." Wilson's words stuck with Jack as he spent the next few days documenting every detail of the harassment. The violation notices, the broken door, the scattered glass, the flag tossed carelessly aside. It all became part of a growing file that would eventually serve as evidence. But Jack couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to uncover. Something about Marcus' operation felt too calculated, too systematic. It wasn't just about power, it was about money. Rodriguez confirmed Jack's suspicions when he dug deeper into public records. "Follow the money," he said, echoing an old military mantra. What he found shocked everyone. Over the past 8 months, the HOA had collected over $87,000 in fines. Less than $9,000 of that went toward actual community maintenance. The rest funneled into shell companies with names like Donnelly Security Consulting and Tactical Assessment Group, all registered within the last year and linked to Marcus' brother-in-law. "It's a money laundering scheme," Rodriguez explained, showing the group screenshots of bank transfers. "They use fake fines to funnel cash into these companies, which then pay Marcus under the table. And get this, 3 properties have been foreclosed on since Marcus took over. All of them were bought at auction by those same shell companies." Jack's stomach churned as the pieces came together. Marcus wasn't just targeting homeowners for fun. He was systematically driving them into financial distress so he could acquire their properties cheaply. Worse still, Marcus had filed papers to run for city council, using his successful management of Oakwood Estates as a platform. If elected, he'd have even more power to manipulate zoning laws, property values, and development contracts. But the twists didn't end there. As the group continued investigating, they uncovered another alarming pattern. Several elderly residents reported being pressured to sell their homes to approved buyers at below-market rates to avoid mounting HOA fines. One such resident, Mrs. Peterson, had sold her house for $50,000 less than its market value to settle $8,000 in fines she couldn't afford. The buyer? Donnelly Investment Group, yet another shell company tied to Marcus. "This isn't just fraud," Mike said gravely. "It's organized theft. He's preying on the vulnerable, single parents, elderly residents, anyone who can't fight back. And if we don't stop him now, he'll keep doing it." The group knew they needed to act fast. Legal motions alone wouldn't be enough. Marcus' political connections could delay justice for months while more homeowners suffered. They decided to take the fight directly to the source, the monthly HOA meeting scheduled for that Saturday. It was risky, but it was necessary. On Friday evening, Jack called every member of the Iron Veterans chapter. "Listen up," he said. "This isn't just about my house or my flag anymore. This is about standing up for what's right. These crooks might not be foreign enemies, but they're sure as hell enemies of their own community." The response was unanimous. Every single veteran promised to show up, not to intimidate, but to support the victims and expose the truth. By Saturday morning, 27 motorcycles rumbled into Oakwood Estates, each rider wearing their Iron Veterans cut proudly. American flags fluttered from several bikes, a silent reminder of the values Marcus and his team had trampled on. As they parked outside the clubhouse, Jack spotted Marcus through the window. The man's face turned pale as bike after tool. The day of the HOA meeting arrived, and tension hung thick in the air. Jack woke up early, his mind racing with thoughts of what was about to unfold. He knew this wasn't just about him anymore. It was about every homeowner who had been bullied, intimidated, or pushed out of their home by Marcus Donnelly's regime. As he tightened the straps on his leather cut, emblazoned with the Iron Veterans patch, he felt a sense of purpose stronger than ever before. Today wasn't just about justice. It was about reclaiming dignity for an entire community. By 9 a.m., the clubhouse parking lot was already filling up, not just with residents but with motorcycles. One by one, members of the Iron Veterans rolled in, each bike roaring like a declaration of defiance. Flags fluttered from handlebars, and patches glinted under the morning sun. For many neighbors, this was the first time they'd seen such unity in Oakwood Estates. Some were nervous, whispering among themselves about whether this would escalate into something dangerous. Others stood tall, reassured by the presence of men and women who had once sworn oaths to protect freedoms far greater than mailbox height regulations. Inside the clubhouse, Marcus sat at the head of the table, flanked by his security team. His usual smug demeanor seemed strained today, his eyes darting toward the window every time another motorcycle pulled in. When Jack entered with Mike and the rest of the veterans, Marcus visibly stiffened. "This is a closed meeting," he announced, his voice louder than usual, trying to mask his unease. "Only residents are allowed." Mike stepped forward, holding up a folder of documents. "Actually, each of these individuals is here as a guest of a resident, which is permitted under Article 3, Section 2 of the HOA bylaws, the same bylaws you've been selectively enforcing." The room fell silent. Marcus opened his mouth to argue but quickly shut it when Mike placed the folder on the table and pulled out copies of the official bylaws. The man who had prided himself on controlling every detail suddenly looked cornered. As the meeting began, Jack took center stage. Standing tall, he addressed the packed room. "My name is Jack Harmon. I served this country for 25 years as a Marine Corps mechanic. Many of you know me as the guy with the bikes. But what you might not know is that our HOA leadership has been systematically violating our rights as homeowners." He paused, letting his words sink in. Gasps rippled through the crowd as he projected security footage onto the wall. Footage showing Marcus men breaking down his door, tossing his flag onto the workbench, and issuing false violation notices. "This isn't just about my house," Jack continued, his voice steady but firm. "This is about all of us." Slowly, other victims began stepping forward. Mrs. Henderson, leaning on her cane, recounted how her late husband's memorial garden had been destroyed. Sarah Johnson described the terror her daughter felt when strangers searched their garage while she was home alone. Mr. Ramirez explained how threats against his food truck business forced him to pay thousands in fabricated fines. Each story added fuel to the growing fire of outrage in the room. Marcus tried to regain control, dismissing the accounts as isolated incidents and misunderstandings. But Mike was ready. With a click of a button, he projected financial records onto the screen. In the last 8 months, the HOA collected $87,000 in fines. Less than $9,000 went toward actual community maintenance. Where did the rest go? He highlighted transfers to shell companies owned by Marcus' brother-in-law. Then came property records showing foreclosed homes purchased by those same companies. The room erupted in anger. For the first time, Marcus looked genuinely afraid. His security team shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact with the veterans surrounding them. Dawson leaned over to Jack and whispered, "These guys aren't used to facing people who fight back." Finally, Mike delivered the knockout blow. "We've filed emergency legal motions against the HOA for multiple violations of state law and civil rights abuses. These documents ensure that any attempt at retaliation will only add to the evidence pile mounting against you." The weight of the situation hit everyone in the room. This wasn't just a neighborhood dispute anymore. It was a full-blown scandal with criminal implications. The aftermath of the HOA meeting spread like wildfire through Oakwood Estates. News outlets picked up the story after Mike leaked the evidence to local journalists. Headlines screamed about corruption, intimidation, and abuse of power within the HOA. Marcus Donnelly's reputation, once polished and authoritative, crumbled under the weight of public scrutiny. Within days, he resigned as HOA president, citing personal reasons. But it didn't matter, his fate was sealed. The district attorney's office launched a formal investigation into the financial misconduct, illegal entries, and systemic harassment. Trevor, the head of security who had tossed Jack's flag onto the workbench, was arrested on outstanding warrants from another state. His criminal record for impersonating a police officer and using excessive force came back to haunt him. The rest of Marcus' security team disbanded overnight, vanishing as quickly as they had appeared. For the first time in months, residents felt a sense of relief wash over them. It wasn't just about Marcus being gone. It was about reclaiming their neighborhood. A new HOA board was elected, composed of trusted neighbors who prioritized transparency and accountability. One of their first acts was to establish a homeowner oversight committee. This group would review all decisions and ensure no one could abuse power again. Financial records were made public, and monthly meetings were held openly so residents could voice concerns without fear of retaliation. Mrs. Henderson became a symbol of resilience. Volunteers rallied to replant her husband's memorial garden, carefully replacing the roses she had lovingly tended for decades. As she stood beside Jack during the planting, tears streaming down her face, she whispered, "It's not just about the flowers. It's about remembering who we are, and standing together when someone tries to take that away." Sarah Johnson's daughter slowly regained confidence, thanks to therapy sessions funded by donations from the community. Neighbors organized a fundraiser to help cover her medical bills, ensuring she wouldn't have to reduce her hours at the hospital. Mr. Ramirez found relief when the new board reversed the fraudulent fines against him, allowing him to focus on growing his food truck business instead of fighting bogus charges. For Jack, the most meaningful change was seeing the American flag fly proudly throughout the neighborhood, not just in his garage but on newly installed flagpoles outside homes. It was a small gesture, but it carried immense symbolism. People weren't just reclaiming their properties. They were reclaiming their pride. Life in Oakwood Estates began to return to normal, but it was a different kind of normal. Neighbors who had once kept to themselves now exchanged smiles and waves. Children played freely in driveways without worrying about arbitrary rules. And for the first time in years, the community felt like a true neighborhood rather than a collection of houses governed by fear. Jack often sat on his porch, watching the sunset with a cold beer in hand. He thought about the journey they'd been through. The broken door, the shattered glass, the flag tossed carelessly aside. But he also thought about the unity that had emerged from the chaos. The Iron Veterans had reminded everyone what real authority looked like. Not power wielded through intimidation, but strength rooted in justice and respect. As he gazed at the horizon, Jack smiled. They hadn't just defeated Marcus and his corrupt regime. They had built something stronger. A community that stood together, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The fallout from the HOA scandal didn't just change Oakwood Estates. It changed its people. For weeks after Marcus Donnelly's resignation, the neighborhood buzzed with a mix of relief, anger, and cautious optimism. Residents who had once avoided each other now exchanged smiles in the streets. Children played freely in driveways without fear of arbitrary fines or inspections. And for the first time in years, the community felt like a real neighborhood rather than a collection of houses governed by fear. Jack Harmon sat on his porch one evening, watching the sunset with a cold beer in hand. It was a scene he dreamed of when he first moved to Oakwood Estates, but it felt different now, earned, hard-fought. He thought about everything they'd been through. The broken door, the shattered glass, the flag tossed carelessly onto his workbench. But more than anything, he thought about the unity that had emerged from the chaos. The Iron veterans hadn't just stood up for themselves. They'd reminded everyone what it meant to stand together. Mrs. Henderson became a symbol of resilience. Volunteers rallied around her, replanting the memorial garden she'd lovingly tended for decades. As Jack helped plant roses alongside her, she whispered, "It's not just about the flowers. It's about remembering who we are, and standing together when someone tries to take that away." Her words stayed with him long after the last rose was planted. Sarah Johnson's daughter slowly regained confidence, thanks to therapy sessions funded by donations from the community. Neighbors organized a fundraiser to help cover her medical bills, ensuring she wouldn't have to reduce her hours at the hospital. Mr. Ramirez found relief when the new board reversed the fraudulent fines against him, allowing him to focus on growing his food truck business instead of fighting bogus charges. For Jack, the most meaningful change was seeing the American flag fly proudly throughout the neighborhood, not just in his garage but on newly installed flagpoles outside homes. It was a small gesture, but it carried immense symbolism. People weren't just reclaiming their properties. They were reclaiming their pride. But the lessons went deeper than flags and gardens. What started as a personal fight over property rights had revealed something far more important: the power of community. Marcus Donnelly had underestimated the strength of people united by shared values and common goals. He thought he could intimidate them into submission, but instead, he awakened a spirit of resistance that couldn't be silenced. Mike often reminded everyone during club meetings, this wasn't just about stopping Marcus. It was about proving that no one is above accountability, not even those who claim authority. The legal battle continued as the district attorney pursued charges against Marcus and his associates. But for the residents of Oakwood Estates, justice wasn't just about punishment. It was about prevention. They wanted to ensure this kind of abuse of power never happened again. To that end, the new HOA board implemented strict transparency measures. Financial records were made public, and monthly meetings were held openly so residents could voice concerns without fear of retaliation. An oversight committee was established to review all decisions and ensure fairness. For the first time, homeowners felt like they truly had a say in how their community was run. As life returned to normal, or rather, a better version of normal, Jack reflected on the journey. He thought about the veterans who had stood by him, the neighbors who had found courage to speak out, and the victims who had refused to stay silent any longer. They had faced adversity head-on, not because they sought conflict, but because they believed in something greater than themselves. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Wilson joined Jack on the porch. The old man leaned back in his chair, his weathered hands resting on his knees. "You know," he said quietly, "in Vietnam we learned that freedom isn't free. Sometimes you have to fight for it, even if it's just the right to hang your flag where you damn well please." Jack nodded, a faint smile crossing his face. "And sometimes," he replied, "you find out that the real enemy isn't some foreign power. It's the people who forget what it means to serve, to protect, not control." Wilson chuckled softly. "Well said, son. Well said." As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Jack felt a deep sense of peace. The scars of the past few months would always remain. The splintered door frame, the broken photo frame, the memories of intimidation and harassment. But they were reminders of something bigger: resilience, unity, and the unshakable belief that standing your ground isn't just about protecting yourself. It's about protecting everyone who can't stand up alone. When they smashed his door screaming, "You're in violation," they never expected to find a brotherhood that would remind them what real American values look like. Just when the residents of Oakwood Estates thought they had won, a new twist emerged that shook the foundation of their hard-fought victory. It started with an anonymous envelope slipped under Jack's door late one night. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a photocopy of a bank statement showing transfers from Marcus Donnelly's shell companies to a name no one expected. Richard Langley, the former HOA president who had fled shortly after Marcus took over. Jack stared at the document, his mind racing. Richard hadn't just left because he disagreed with Marcus' methods. He'd been complicit all along. The revelation hit like a punch to the gut. Richard wasn't the reasonable, fair leader everyone remembered. He was part of the scheme, quietly profiting while pretending to be above it. Worse still, the transactions dated back months before Marcus even became president, suggesting this corruption had roots deeper than anyone realized. The next morning, Mike called an emergency meeting at Jack's house. "We have a problem," Jack said as he laid out the evidence on the kitchen table. Mike studied the document carefully, his jaw tightening. "This changes everything," he muttered. "If Richard was involved, then this isn't just about Marcus. It's systemic. And if we don't act fast, whoever's pulling the strings behind the scenes will find a way to erase their tracks." Rodriguez leaned forward, tapping the paper. What if Richard didn't leave town voluntarily? What if Marcus forced him out once he consolidated power? Dawson nodded grimly. That makes sense. Why else would someone in Richard's position walk away without a fight? But now we need to figure out where he is, and whether he's willing to talk. Wilson, ever the strategist, suggested reaching out to Richard directly. "He might not trust us yet, but if we play our cards right, we can turn him into an ally. After all, he has as much to lose as we do if this comes crashing down." With no other options, the group agreed to track Richard down. Using public records and social media sleuthing, they discovered he was living in a small apartment 2 counties over, far from the upscale neighborhood he used to call home. 2 days later, Jack and Mike drove to Richard's new address. The contrast between his current life and his past was stark. Gone were the manicured lawns and luxury cars. Instead, they found a modest building surrounded by chain-link fences. When Richard opened the door, he looked years older. His hair grayer, his posture slouched. For a moment, he seemed frozen, staring at them like ghosts from another life. "I knew you'd come eventually," Richard said finally, stepping aside to let them in. His voice was weary but resigned. Over coffee, he confessed everything. Yes, he had been part of the scheme, at first unknowingly, then willingly. Marcus had approached him years ago with promises of easy money, convincing him to funnel HOA funds into shell companies for community improvements that never materialized. At first, Richard believed it was harmless, but as the operation grew, so did his guilt. When Marcus decided to take over completely, Richard tried to back out, but Marcus threatened to expose him unless he sold his house and disappeared. "He made sure I couldn't say anything," Richard admitted bitterly. "Every time I thought about speaking up, I got emails reminding me how much trouble I'd be in, so I stayed quiet. But what you guys did, it gave me hope. Maybe there's still a chance to fix this mess." Richard's testimony added fuel to the fire. Armed with his insider knowledge, the group uncovered another layer of corruption. Marcus wasn't working alone. Behind the scenes, a real estate developer named Victor Langston had been orchestrating the entire operation. Through intermediaries, Victor planned to acquire large portions of Oakwood estates at rock-bottom prices, demolish the homes, and build luxury condos. Marcus was merely a pawn, a frontman tasked with driving homeowners out through intimidation and financial pressure. But the biggest shock came when Wilson dug deeper into Victor's background. A retired Navy SEAL himself, Wilson recognized the name from classified missions decades earlier. Victor Langston wasn't just any developer. He was tied to offshore accounts linked to organized crime syndicates. This wasn't just a land grab. It was money laundering on a massive scale, using HOAs across multiple neighborhoods to funnel dirty cash. With this new information, Mike devised a bold plan. They wouldn't just expose Marcus, they'd take down the entire operation. First, they contacted investigative journalists known for exposing corruption. Then, they reached out to federal agencies specializing in white-collar crimes and money laundering. Finally, they rallied the community again, explaining the full scope of the conspiracy. To protect vulnerable residents, They set up legal defense funds and connected victims with pro bono attorneys. As the investigation unfolded, Victor attempted to cover his tracks, offering bribes and threatening witnesses. But the tide had turned. Neighbors who had once feared retaliation now stood united, bolstered by the veterans' unwavering support. Even Richard stepped forward, testifying against both Marcus and Victor in exchange for immunity. The final showdown came during a televised city council hearing where Marcus had hoped to salvage his political career. Instead, he walked into a room packed with reporters, federal agents, and furious homeowners holding damning evidence. As cameras rolled, Jack delivered a powerful statement. This isn't just about Oakwood Estates. This is about every homeowner who's been bullied, intimidated, or pushed out of their home by people who think they're untouchable. Today, we're sending a message. No one is above accountability. Not here, not anywhere. By the end of the hearing, Marcus and Victor were arrested, and the investigation expanded to include dozens of other HOAs implicated in similar schemes. For Oakwood Estates, justice felt bittersweet. Lives had been disrupted, trust shattered, and scars left behind. But amidst the pain, something beautiful emerged. A renewed sense of community forged in the fires of adversity. Just when it seemed like justice had finally been served, a new twist emerged that shook Oakwood Estates to its core. It started with an anonymous email sent to Jack's secure account, the same one they'd set up to gather evidence against Marcus Donnelly. The subject line read, "You haven't seen the half of it." Attached was a single document, a property deed showing Victor Langston's name as the owner of not just Oakwood Estates but 3 other neighborhoods nearby. Beneath the deed was a handwritten note scrawled in bold letters. "He owns your homes. He owns your lives." Jack stared at the screen, his heart pounding. Victor wasn't just a real estate developer looking to flip properties. He was building an empire, quietly acquiring entire communities under the guise of HOAs and shell companies. But what chilled Jack most was the realization that this wasn't about money or luxury condos anymore. This was something far darker, far more personal. The next morning, Mike called an emergency meeting at Jack's house. "We have a problem," Jack said as he projected the email onto the wall. Mike studied the document carefully, his jaw tightening. "This changes everything," he muttered. "If Victor owns multiple neighborhoods, then this isn't just about Oakwood Estates. It's systemic. And if we don't act fast, whoever's pulling the strings behind Victor will find a way to erase their tracks." Rodriguez leaned forward, tapping the screen. What if Victor isn't working alone? What if there's someone above him? A bigger player we haven't uncovered yet? Dawson nodded grimly. That makes sense. Why else would someone with his resources risk exposure by targeting veterans and vulnerable homeowners? There has to be another layer. Wilson, ever the strategist, suggested digging deeper into Victor's background. "Let's follow the trail," he said. "If he's tied to offshore accounts and organized crime syndicates, we need proof, and allies who can help us take him down." With no other options, the group agreed to track Victor's connections, starting with leaked corporate records and financial disclosures filed with state agencies. 2 days later, Rodriguez discovered something alarming. Victor Langston wasn't just laundering money through HOAs. He was using them to launder people. Hidden within the contracts for landscaping crews, construction teams, and security personnel were names flagged by federal authorities. Undocumented workers brought in under false pretenses, forced laborers exploited for cheap manpower, and even individuals with criminal ties linked to human trafficking rings. Victor's operation wasn't just corrupt. It was criminal on a scale none of them had anticipated. But the biggest shock came when Wilson dug deeper into Victor's military history. A retired Navy SEAL himself, Wilson recognized patterns from classified missions decades earlier. Victor hadn't just served. He'd been dishonorably discharged after being implicated in a black market arms deal overseas. Worse still, his discharge papers listed connections to shadowy figures known for funding private militias and destabilizing regions for profit. This wasn't just about real estate development, it was about power. Control over land meant control over people, and Victor was playing a long game. With this new information, Mike devised a bold plan. They wouldn't just expose Victor, they'd dismantle his entire network. First, they contacted investigative journalists known for exposing corruption. Then, they reached out to federal agencies specializing in human trafficking, organized crime, and money laundering. Finally, they rallied the community again, explaining the full scope of the conspiracy. To protect vulnerable residents, they set up legal defense funds and connected victims with pro bono attorneys. As the investigation unfolded, Victor attempted to cover his tracks, offering bribes and threatening witnesses. But the tide had turned. Neighbors who had once feared retaliation now stood united, bolstered by the veterans' unwavering support. Even Richard stepped forward, testifying against both Marcus and Victor in exchange for immunity. The final showdown came during a televised city council hearing where Marcus had hoped to salvage his political career. Instead, he walked into a room packed with reporters, federal agents, and furious homeowners holding damning evidence. As cameras rolled, Jack delivered a powerful statement. This isn't just about Oakwood Estates. This is about every homeowner who's been bullied, intimidated, or pushed out of their home by people who think they're untouchable. Today, we're sending a message. No one is above accountability. Not here, not anywhere. The fallout from the HOA scandal continued to ripple through Oakwood Estates, but just as the community began to heal, an unexpected twist emerged that no one saw coming. Started with a phone call late one night. Jack was in his garage, tinkering with his Harley, when his phone buzzed on the workbench. The caller ID showed a private number, and for a moment he hesitated before answering. On the other end of the line was a shaky voice. Richard Langley, the former HOA president who had fled after Marcus took over. "Jack," Richard said, his tone urgent. "You need to meet me. There's something you don't know. Something bigger than Marcus, bigger than Victor. This isn't over." Before Jack could ask more, Richard hung up. Minutes later, a text message arrived with coordinates to a remote diner on the outskirts of town. Jack's instincts screamed caution, but curiosity won out. He called Mike, Dawson, and Rodriguez, and within the hour, they were on their way. When they arrived at the diner, Richard was sitting in a corner booth, his face pale and drawn. He looked like a man carrying the weight of the world. "I didn't leave because I wanted to," Richard confessed after ordering coffee. "Marcus forced me out. But there's more, he wasn't working alone. Someone else was pulling the strings." Richard handed Jack a flash drive. "This has everything: emails, bank records, contracts. Marcus was just a puppet. The real mastermind is someone none of us suspected. Judge Eleanor Grayson." The name hit like a thunderclap. Judge Grayson was a well-respected figure in the community, known for her fairness and integrity. She had even presided over cases involving HOAs and property disputes. "She's been using her position to manipulate zoning laws and property values," Richard explained. "Victor was her frontman. She funneled money through him to acquire land under the guise of development. Her goal? To create a private luxury estate, a gated community for the elite, while pushing everyone else out." Mike's jaw tightened. "If this gets out, it'll destroy her career." "Why are you telling us now?" Richard sighed, his hands trembling. "Because I can't live with myself anymore. I thought I could walk away, but I've seen what she's capable of. She's already destroyed lives. If we don't stop her, she'll keep going." The group knew they were stepping into dangerous territory. Exposing a judge wouldn't be easy, especially one as powerful as Eleanor Grayson. But they also knew they couldn't back down. Over the next few days, they pored over the evidence on the flash drive. What they found was damning: emails between Grayson and Victor discussing property acquisitions, falsified court documents, and even threats against homeowners who resisted. With the evidence in hand, Mike devised a plan. They would take the story public, but not through traditional media. Instead, they created a documentary-style video, compiling testimony from victims, security footage, and screenshots of the incriminating documents. The video ended with a direct message to Judge Grayson. "You swore to uphold justice. Now it's time to answer for your crimes." They uploaded the video to social media late one night, tagging local news outlets, activist groups, and even national investigative journalists. By morning, it had gone viral. The hashtag #JusticeForOakwood trended statewide, and calls for an investigation into Judge Grayson flooded government offices. Within 48 hours, federal authorities launched a probe into her activities, citing potential corruption, abuse of power, and conspiracy. But Judge Grayson wasn't about to go quietly. In a desperate attempt to salvage her reputation, she held a press conference denying all allegations. "These accusations are baseless," she declared, her voice steady but her eyes betraying unease. "I have dedicated my life to serving this community. To suggest otherwise is nothing short of slander." Her words might have worked if not for one thing: Sarah Johnson's daughter. The 12-year-old girl, inspired by the courage of her neighbors, came forward with a recording. While hiding in the bathroom during the unauthorized search of their home, she had secretly filmed the intruders. The video clearly showed one of them mentioning Judge Grayson's name, saying, "She wants results, not excuses." The clip aired on every major news channel, leaving Grayson visibly shaken. Within days, Judge Grayson resigned from her position and was placed under house arrest pending further investigation. Victor Langston turned state's witness in exchange for immunity, providing additional evidence against her. Marcus Donnelly, Trevor, and the rest of the security team faced multiple charges, including breaking and entering, extortion, and fraud. The shell companies were dismantled, and the properties acquired illegally were returned to their rightful owners. For Oakwood Estates, the victory was bittersweet. Lives had been disrupted, trust shattered, and scars left behind. But amidst the pain, something beautiful emerged. A renewed sense of community forged in the fires of adversity. Neighbors who had once kept to themselves now shared meals, exchanged stories, and looked out for one another. Mrs. Henderson's garden bloomed again, tended by volunteers who saw it as a symbol of resilience. Sarah's daughter, once terrified of being home alone, became a local hero, inspiring others to stand up for what's right. Jack stood on his porch one evening, watching the sunset with a cold beer in hand. Beside him flew the American flag, restored to its rightful place. He thought about everything they'd been through: the broken door, the shattered glass, the intimidation, the fear. But more than anything, he thought about the unity that had emerged from the chaos. The Iron Veterans had reminded everyone what real authority looked like. Not power wielded through intimidation, but strength rooted in justice and respect. As Wilson often said, "Freedom isn't free. Sometimes you have to fight for it, even if it's just the right to hang your flag where you damn well please." And so, Oakwood Estates moved forward, not as a collection of houses governed by fear, but as a true neighborhood united by shared values and unshakable resolve. When they smashed Jack's door screaming, "You're in violation," they never expected to find a brotherhood that would remind them what real American values look like. The final twist wasn't just about exposing corruption, it was about redemption. For Jack, for his neighbors, and for everyone who believed that standing your ground wasn't just about protecting yourself. It was about protecting everyone who couldn't stand up alone.